whose contributions has left an indelible mark in the field of criminology and beyond. I now invite Dr. C. Rajkumar, Professor S.G. Srijit, Professor Sridhar Patnaik, and Dr. R.K. Raghavan to honor Professor Hood's memory through a floral tribute and the lighting of the lamp. I now welcome our founding Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. C. Rajkumar, for the welcome address.
All right, very, very good morning to all of you, and it's an absolute delight and a pleasure for us to have today the Professor Dr. Roger Hood Memorial Lecture. For all of those who are watching this live on Facebook and YouTube, welcome to OP Jindal Global University and Jindal Global Law School's lecture series. I want to begin by saying that we are indeed celebrating an extraordinary man. I had the privilege to be his student. Professor Hood was my professor and teacher at Oxford. I took a course on crime, justice, and the penal system at All Souls College, where he was fellow. So many memories come to me, including the early origins of this idea of this university. At the All Souls College was the college where, for the first time, I dreamt about the idea of building a university in India. Professor Hood was such a great teacher, an amazing mentor, somebody who had the sagacity to support aspirations of many young people, including me. He was one of the earliest individuals I talked about the idea of building the university. And he was, of course, an extraordinary scholar at a time when criminological research was very much early in terms of its foundational evolution. Professor Hood pioneered so many important areas and disciplines within the broader field of criminology and criminal justice. He was a prolific researcher, a great teacher, an amazing mentor, and a very generous person as well. He spent, of course, in the latter part of his career, he devoted his entire good part of his life towards death penalty, systematic, research-oriented, rigorous, empirical research on worldwide death penalty trends, including ultimately focusing towards its abolition. He had this amazing faith in the ability of public policy, rising up to the challenge of looking at evidence as to how futile death penalty is when it comes to being a tool for punishment. We've also had the privilege to host him on our campus many times. I also brought him to India to interact with our judges and lawyers. And when Honorable President Pranab Mukherjee was president, we had a wonderful meeting with the Honorable President and discussed. And I was so privileged to be with the President and Professor Hood when we discussed for more than an hour about death penalty and its challenges within India, but also even when he died, he had this fervent belief that at some point of time we in India will abolish death penalty, looking at the evidence, but also looking at the global trends when it comes to the entire universe moving in the direction of either abolishing death penalty completely from the statute books, or to be able to use it very rarely, if at all. Roger Hood also sat in the International Board of Advisors of O.P. Jindal Global University when it did not exist. He had such faith and belief in the idea that he lent his name and, of course, supported it. So I want to personally pay tribute to my teacher, my mentor, and indeed a truly remarkable public intellectual, Professor Dr. Roger Hood. We are also very fortunate that this lecture is being delivered by Dr. R.K. Raghavan. For those of you who may or may not know, Dr. Raghavan, of course, has had many lives in one life. His life itself epitomizes title of a very interesting biography. He can actually call that title, One Life is Not Enough. He has had extraordinary careers, in spanning so many decades. He has been a distinguished police officer, an absolutely amazing academic. He has held visiting professorships and fellowships in different parts of the world. Besides being a police officer, he did his master's in criminal justice at Temple University. Having had a long career in police, he also spent almost 15 years at the Tata Consultancy Services as head of their cyber security division. And then, of course, he also held many public positions, including Supreme Court appointed chief of special investigative teams on a number of issues. So he has spent an amazing part of his life pursuing so many important responsibilities. And of course, we are also very fortunate that he serves as a distinguished professor at our own university. For those of you who may not be aware, Dr. R.K. Raghavan was part of the earliest effort to build this university. He was part of a committee that I had constituted as a part of a foundation, which used to have many conversations in the run-up to the idea of building this university. And ultimately, when Mr. H.R. Bharadwaj, the then law minister, introduced me to Mr. Naveen Jindal on 31st October 2006, the first meeting I had with Mr. Jindal at Bikaji Kama Place, it was Dr. Raghavan who was present with us at that meeting. So the umbilical cord that connects this university to Dr. R.K. Raghavan is quite significant. Since then, he has been an ardent supporter and a great source of inspiration for me personally, but also for many of us who have been able to be part of this effort. We are very fortunate that he has also now accepted a professorship at our university, so we will see a lot more of him from next February, when he will be teaching 2 courses at our university and spending the spring semester on our campus. With those words, I have great pleasure in once again formally welcoming Professor Dr. R.K. Raghavan to our university, and also to thank him for accepting to deliver the Professor Dr. Roger Hood Memorial Lecture on the theme, Criminal Justice Systems in Liberal Democracies and International Perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Raj, for taking us down the memory lane of such a luminary scholar. I would now like to invite Professor S.G. Srijit, the Executive Dean of Jindal Global Law School and the Dean of Strategies and Institution Building, to share with us some introductory remarks about the theme of today's lecture.
Good morning to everybody, and welcome to the Professor Dr. Roger Hood Memorial Lecture on the theme, Criminal Justice Systems in Liberal Democracies and International Perspectives. So by way of setting that context, let me speak a little bit about liberal democracies. You know that it's not just a textbookish form of democracy, but it goes much beyond that. And the term liberal democracies or liberal democracy has been a little more complicated and made a scary term by Francis Fukuyama when he wrote his celebrated book, End of the History and the Last Man. So liberal democracy is arguably an end of something. Going by Francis Fukuyama, with liberal democracy, history ended. It does not mean that events will stop to transpire, but the pattern in which the world evolved by way of the historical trajectories, that ended. That also means that liberal democracy is a is arguably the beginning of an era with no more histories, but only phenomena and only models. Either way, liberal democracy is something to be taken seriously, because when Fukuyama was asked what will come after liberal democracies, in an interview his response was that more liberal democracies. And after that, more liberal democracies. And after that, more liberal democracies. So that means the rest of our lives, or rest of the history, I mean, if I may use the word history because the book argues that history has ended, we are going to have our own life in liberal democracies. Now, liberal democracy is a synonym also for the social and the politically desirable. That means this is an ideal world in which one could live, because this is a world which is going to be characterized by stability, predictability, rule of law, organization, and order. I mean, this is definitely a textbookish definition of liberal democracy. But interestingly, economically also, liberal democracies are a little problematic, because every liberal democracy is going to be driven by the underlying ideology of neoliberalism. Neoliberalism, in a Marxist terminology, is to be commodity fetish. That means that you should have the extraordinary capital generating potential if you want to be a citizen in a liberal democracy. In other words, citizen in a liberal democracy is not a social animal, but citizen in a liberal democracy is a homo socio-economicus. That means one who lives their life by making constant rational choices. Now, this makes it all the more challenging for criminal justice system, because you have a society here to govern which is driven not by individual morality or sense of rectitude, but it's going to be governed primarily by the rational choices which the homo socio-economicus would be making in liberal democracies. So, liberal democracy is also a kind of, what you say, an active ideal. It's not passive. It's not a place where people just rest and there is zero entropy there. So, absolute peace in liberal democracy is a no-no, where rather it's not even feasible. So liberal democracy is like a dynamic system which is going to be, which is propelled by the rational choices made by individuals. Now the question is that when you deviate from the rule of law, are you really committing a crime, or have you made a choice which is Pareto optimal? These kind of questions are going to make establishment of the rule of law or a criminal justice system in the proverbial model challenging in liberal democracies. So law is also not a constant in liberal democracies. It's a variable here. So law is not something that fetches normative behavior in liberal democracies. Here, law is information which will help you make your rational choices. So if you make a choice based on the law, you make it. If you make a choice which is completely different from what is ideal behavior, you please make that choices. And for the same reason, liberal democracies are not problem-free. There is no emphasis on crime control per se in liberal democracies. As I said, individuals here make rational choices, and you cannot morally indict an individual or penalize an individual for making a rational choice. That means that there is no language of crime control per se in liberal democracies. But here, the language is more on due process. And for that same reason, in liberal democracies, law exists in the form of due process guarantees, zero tolerance to violence. Well, violence is absolutely despised in liberal democracies. Prevention of human rights violations. And lastly, regulating new age crimes like terrorism, corruption, money laundering, etc. In sum, liberal democracies are enigmas that further perplexes us when we start to look at them from the perspective of criminal justice reform. Interestingly, liberal democracies also believe in individual liberty here. It doesn't, liberal democracies do not believe that individual behavior should be curtailed. And this is beautifully captured by Khalil Gibran in a poem. You can muffle the drums. You can tie the strings of a lyre. But can you really stop a skylark from singing? So it believes in individual liberties. The skylark ought to sing, and skylarks shall sing. So regulating behavior in liberal democracies become a big challenge, and that becomes all the more challenging when it comes to establishing a criminal justice system. So a few questions. There is larger demand also for democratization of the criminal justice system in liberal democracies. Is there a limit of this democratization? We are not certain. What democratic values should be acceptable by the criminal justice system in liberal democracies? And lastly, in the criminal justice system in liberal democracies, as I've mentioned, they don't focus on crime control, but they focus on something called the crime management. How the former, the crime management, will be organized in liberal democracies? Well, I don't have answers for these questions, but as you, I'm also here to be an active listener, and I believe that that active listening will give us answers for these questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Srijit, for setting the tone for today's lecture. Your remarks were most insightful. Before we proceed to today's lecture, I would like to take a moment to reflect on the enduring legacy of Dr. Roger Hood. Professor Hood's work cuts across a diversity of critical issues, ranging from the death penalty to sentencing policies to wrongful convictions and to the right of the accused. Professor Hood's arguably the most remarkable amongst Professor Hood's many achievements is his groundbreaking research on capital punishment. His research has made a significant contribution to the global movement towards abolition of the death penalty, shining a light on the inherent flaws and injustices in this form of punishment. On that note, it is my honor to introduce you to our distinguished guest of honor, Dr. R.K. Raghavan. Dr. Raghavan has held several distinguished positions throughout his career. He is the former director of the CBI and the former High Commissioner for India to the Republic of Cyprus. He is also the recipient of the Indian Police Medal for Meritorious Service and President's Medal for Distinguished Service. Apart from having held such crucial leadership roles, Dr. Raghavan is also a widely published author. His last published book in 2020 is his autobiography, which is very aptly titled A Road Well Traveled, wherein Dr. Raghavan has penned down his experiences and shared anecdotes of many of the high-profile cases that he's been a part of in his illustrious career. Thank you very much, Dr. Raghavan, for accepting our invitation to be here today to speak to us on the theme, Criminal Justice Systems in Liberal Democracies, an International Perspective. I have perhaps been standing too long between the audience and our distinguished guests, so please, Dr. Raghavan.
Good morning to all of you. Such a privilege to be here amongst so many young minds. A long time since I mingled so closely with minds like yours. I think you should also deem it your privilege to be part of this great atmosphere. Good morning to Rajkumar and other distinguished members on the dais. And I always had a fascination for Jindal, not merely because I was part of the founding fathers, if I can pridefully refer to myself. Raj has been a dear friend. I've been watching with amazement the growth of this institution. I'm a reasonably good, strong optimist, but I never thought he could build such an institution as he has done. And it's my pride that he considers me as part of this great institution. I look forward to coming here very often. Only pity is that you are so far away from my home. And so that's why I initially opted to teach online. But the stickler that he is to propriety and procedure, Rajkumar said I should come personally here to teach. It's a little hard on myself. My family is not exactly for it. They say it's too far and too long to be away from home. But for a change, I've chosen to defy my family, come here, because this is almost my home. And I'm very happy that I've been invited to deliver this prestigious talk. A lot of hard work preparing for it for the last 1 week. I've been living a cloistered existence and away from my wife. And try to put down some thoughts. I want to prepare you for this. It's not a great lecture, it's not a great collection of great ideas, but whatever I thought I should put down, I have made a talk on this, and I hope this will not be a monologue. I want it to be a dialogue. Please ask me any questions, except what I did in the CBI or the SIT. Anything else, I am prepared to talk to you this morning. Propriety demands that I do not wax eloquent on what I did as CBI director or the chairman of the SIT Gujarat, which has played a very important role in the life of this nation. And with that prelude, I thought I could speak to you, open myself for questions. But I would like to, before I begin, I want to be very formal. I'd like to record my appreciation for Rajkumar and his large and dedicated team who have brought about a near miracle in the exciting field of higher education. And you are all fortunate recipients of his erudition and generosity. It is excruciatingly difficult in our times to build a sustainable and meaningful institution. Mark my words, sustainable, meaningful institutions. It sustained itself and is another part of the academic life of this country. To preserve such monumental creation through tender care, objectivity, and skill is an even more difficult task. My congratulations to Raj and all of you, the entire team, and all of you have made this institution and this environment a great experience to anyone who comes to visit you. Professor Raja Hood was no ordinary individual, no ordinary scholar. His devotion to the cause of abolishing the death penalty was phenomenal. Years after his demise, if you recall him here, if you recall on this morning, is because to celebrate his sense of mission and zeal in promoting knowledge on an issue that is critical to our civilization. Because I would like to make my proposition even at the outset, death penalty is contrary to civilization. No civilized nation can keep this on its statute and claim itself to be a champion of individual rights. His flawlessly researched work related mainly to death penalty, thereby inviting the critical attention of a world that is still sharply divided over the continued need to abolish the death penalty from our statutes. He was compassionate to the core. He categorically dismissed all theories that capital sentence has a deterrence effect. He was a firm believer of restorative justice. If anybody says that capital sentence is deterrent, I refuse to agree with it. Going by the figures of homicides, rapes, all over the world, capital punishment has the little deterrence, because all such crimes are committed out of a sudden emotion, sudden impulse, and no penalty, however harsh it may be, can ever prevent homicides or rapes, all of us know. A professor friend of mine, I quizzed, because I was not exactly familiar with Dr. Roger Wood. I have, unfortunately, haven't had the privilege of meeting him in his life. I quizzed a professor friend of mine who knew Professor Roger Wood. He tells me that Professor Hood demonstrated to the world that criminological theory and research can indeed be in service of policy, fairness, and justice. It's not on the statute books alone, it's not purely academic. Criminology and research go hand in hand and may be looked upon as in the service of fairness and justice. Theory and research are not standalone entities. Can there be a greater tribute to a scholar who spent all his career in the cause of educating researchers and the public alike? Apart from discussing various aspects of capital punishment. I will be taking the opportunity to traverse areas such as law enforcement, the judiciary, and corrections, which all have immense relevance to crime and its punishment. Mine will be my exercise this morning. It will be a sort of comparative study involving three prominent democracies, the US, UK, and India. Most of Europe shares practices of these three countries. So I don't have to individually dwell on each of these countries. I can club all European nations into one and pit it against all three great countries, US, UK, and India. Most of Europe shares practices of these three countries. At the end of the lecture, I hope to summarize what has been achieved and what remains to be researched. This will be of great interest to criminal justice practitioners all over the world. Undoubtedly, we live in a world of strife and hatred. Despite all the progress man has made in science and technology that we have achieved, we are still enveloped in prejudices and fear. Objectivity is a casualty and is a distant dream. The field of criminal justice is not exempt from this world of prejudice and hatred. This is especially over the death penalty. Cesare Beccaria, the great legendary Italian criminologist, legal philosopher, and political economist of the 18th century, was one of the first to demand an end to torture and death, and the death penalty. Since his time, since Beccaria's time in the 18th century, the debate has gone on without any conclusion. Hearteningly, however, many nations across the globe have now either abolished this irreversible punishment or have slowed down shown extreme reluctance to execute offenders without actually removing the penalty from their statute books. India, an example. There is a strong demand, not vociferous enough, demand for abolition of death penalty in our own country, but the powers that be do not agree with this demand, but still they kept the penalty on the statute. In the probably misconceived and fond belief that as long as death penalty remains on the statute books, the number of homicides and rapes, which are the most violent offenses, will decline. According to one report, 53 or 27% of the United Nations members maintain the death penalty in law and practice. About 11% permit its use, but have abolished it de facto. De jure, it will be okay, it will write, but de facto, they have abolished the penalty. The rest have fallen in line to totally abolish it. In India, there is no reliable statistics. Statistics are always suspect, and not many of us believe that statistics convey the real truth. In India, there is no reliable statistics on how many prisoners have been executed since independence. There is sharp divergence in figures quoted. However, generally speaking, there have been 500 prisoners were on death row in India at the end of 2023. So till about a year ago, 500 had been convicted for death, but they were yet to be executed, waiting in their line. There, fortunately, the rarest of rare cases doctrine, which you'll constantly hear about this doctrine. Not many people know what is the rarest of rare cases. Definitions vary, perceptions vary, but still it introduces a certain discipline among courts not to impose this penalty. They can't ignore this rarest of rare cases formula, but they keep doctrine. The rarest of rare cases doctrine laid down in 1980 by the Supreme Court in the Bachchan Singh case still prevails. I'm happy that still prevails. With a small number of executions every year, about 10 to 15 executions. I'm not condoning, I'm not saying it's good, but it's better than nothing at all. No rule of thumb exercise takes place. Every court is conscious of this fact that it cannot be trigger happy, and it has to at least consider this doctrine of the rarest of rare cases and then impose the death penalty on an accused. A small number of executions alone take place each year. In a few recent observations, the Apex Court, the Supreme Court of India, gave expressions to its feeling that there is no uniformity among lower courts in the matter. There's a certain indisciplined regularity in some courts interpreting this doctrine in the way it wants. This is probably not unusual for a country of our size. It's an ungovernable country. It's where each talks in his own voice, and there is a certain indiscipline in the application of this doctrine of the rarest of rare cases. Is happy to record that almost the whole of Europe has abolished the penalty. It's in tune with the democratic beliefs they hold. In the US, while capital punishment remains at the federal level, and in 27 of the 50 states, 23 states have abolished death penalty, which shows that House opinion is sharply divided. It's mainly 50 to 50%. There is therefore no uniformity in a criminal law and sentencing pattern. This again confirms that opinion is divided within European countries for whom the death penalty is abhorrent, and the liberal democracies elsewhere. This logically brings us to an analysis of crime patterns in the liberal democracies. Talking of death penalty in isolation is not good criminology. Almost all capital punishments are meted out to violent criminals causing grievous bodily harm to fellow beings. There are about nearly 30,000 homicides in the US every year, and we also are somewhere near about almost every year. I would like to commend to you the publication Crime in India, brought out by the Bureau of Research and Development. It's a reasonably well-edited, convincing, credible assembly of statistics. I know all of us share a certain reservation about official statistics. And here is one compilation on which I bestow my faith. This is an annual compilation. If you're not, I'm sure you would have come across this publication. It is brought out by the Home Ministry and the Bureau of Research and Development. Of course, it relies heavily on statistics sent by the state governments. Like the FBI, the Uniform Crime Report, which the FBI compiles, is based on reports from the various states. So even conceding that you have serious reservations about official statistics, I strongly commend you to read both the Uniform Crime Reports, UCR of the USA, and the Crime in India, brought out by the Government of India. It shows that about 30,000 homicides take place, both in India and the US, and a slightly smaller number, much smaller number in the UK. And as rapes are concerned, again, the US exceeds the number which India reports, nearly about 20,000. Common to all this is the low conviction rate in respect of all these offenses. Approximately 21,000 homicides are reported in the US during 2022. It is the latest year for which statistics are available. In India, the number is about 30,000. If you take into account the geographical area of these two countries, the population, geographically, US may be larger than India, And population-wise, it is 1/3 of our population. As a result, there should be 3 times homicides which US reports. Well, that's not the case. It's a dubious distinction that both India and the US report about 30,000 homicides every year, much smaller number in the case of rapes. The point is, how do you explain the quantum of crime in every country? It varies from country to country. Europe reports much smaller. Number of liberal democracies are in the US, but reports a very much smaller number. But UK also equally small number. Whereas in India and US, crime is high. But the latest reports indicate, because I'm personally acquainted with what happens in the UK, London has become one of the most dangerous capitals in the country, in the world. Very unfortunate how in a liberal democracy, crime still takes place. Indefensible crime of innocent people on the streets of London. This is very unfortunate. I know it for certain. There's no exaggeration. This is happening in a liberal democracy like UK. So if you compare the statistics between US and India, India should have 3 times more homicides and rapes. It doesn't happen. So how do you explain? I think the best of criminologists will not be able to explain why this uniformity in the rate of crime both in the US and India. And so this is a very point which you should consider when you are discussing the death penalty. And then is it anything to do with the law enforcement agencies? During 2022, there were more than 700,000 full-time law enforcement officers in the US. If you include those in the paramilitary in India, it had only a little more than 1 million officers. So the US has nearly 1 million, less than 1 million law enforcement officers. India has a little more than 100,000, but the crime rate is as high as in each of the country. Those who complain that the Indian states are spending more than they should on such a subject like crime, they should ponder this point that crime is very high in our country. My view is that the Indian police should be much larger than that which exists. We have a little more than 100,000 police stations, 10,000 police stations. Consider this. The police station is a fundamental unit of policing in our country. There are more than 10,000 police stations, most of which are understaffed. Interesting to recall here, the numerical strength of the UK is determined by the politics of the country. It may be a liberal democracy, but whenever the Labour comes into power, it says you have far too many policemen, so they axe the number of policemen. Immediately, one can see a splurge in crime. So conservatives immediately point this out. This is sheer politics to reduce the number. Particularly in the context of growing crime in London, the conservatives feel that they should have more police officers than they have on the streets. So there is an impact of politics in policing, especially against grave crime. This is common to all democracies. And then independence of the police force in a double democracy. The US, there are about 20,000 standalone police agencies. It's very difficult to believe. Some forces are as small as 15 to 20, but each of them is appointed, constituted by the mayor. The mayor he elects the chief of police, and he has a very strong say in matters of policing. And we talk of political interference in policing in our country. Compare this with the US, where the mayor makes or unmakes a police chief. In the UK, there are 43 police forces, independent police forces, excluding London. And there also, until recently, there is no question of any politics in policing. But the creation of a crime, of a police chief, to oversee a committee constituted by the government to oversee the working of every police organization, that has raised the cockles of police officers, saying that there is politics in policing, which the conservative government has introduced. So, in a democracy, the test is how much do the politicians interfere with day-to-day policing. Of course, in India, there is definitely a lot of interference, but sometimes it's exaggerated, sometimes it is not. But these are odd facts. In all liberal democracies, what say should politicians have in day-to-day policing? And what say they should have in appointment of the police? London, for instance, the police chief is technically appointed by the Home Secretary, who is the Home Minister. Whereas the Lord Mayor of London, he has a definite say. He gets, particularly if they are from different political parties, if there is a conservative government, and if there is a police chief appointed by the Labour, then they are always in a conflict. And many mayors have seen the back of police chiefs saying, I don't have any confidence. The last police chief, Ian Blair, Sir Ian Blair, whom I knew, the mayor said, I don't have faith in you. You can't formally dismiss him, but he went to town saying that I have no faith in him. The Home Minister, Home Secretary could have said, no, I have faith in him, but the fight did not go up to that extent. The police chief, Ian Blair, very fine officer, will come to India, probably come to Delhi also. He said, I will walk out. If the police chief doesn't, the mayor, who is an important person, he doesn't have faith in me, I would like to quit. Now the number of stabbings take place in London, a very serious crime. The hoodlums in the US have guns, whereas the hoodlums in UK have knives. Very, very difficult. Knives, so many murders of young people have resulted in London. Now, so they say that the mayor, Sajid Khan, I think you remember, right? So he is being accused of lax of policing. This is a hard reality. Why I mention this is a harsh reality of policing in democracies, that police are made accountable for what they are not accountable at all. And interestingly, the English cricketer, Peterson, he is in India now in the IPL team. He goes to town saying, I blame the mayor for there's so many stabbings which take place in London. On what authority is saying, I'm pointing this out to say that politics and policing go together probably much more intensively in liberal democracies. In a dictatorship, I have not heard of anybody in Russia or China police force, being lambasted by the nobody direct. But in democracy, which believes in free speech, there's criticism of those who rule the police. So these are facts which you should remember. You must remember when analyzing policing practices in various democracies. And prison services, for example, have a major role in criminal justice administration. For centuries, prisons had been looked upon as centers of inhumanity and torture. Some measures were introduced in most of the democracies about the middle of 1900s to make them more humane and rule-bound. State reluctance to invest more on prisons has now refreshingly given way to a belief that prisons deserve a large funding to make them more humane and more civilized. Once upon a time, we were witness to abominable overcrowding of prisons. Each of the prisons, especially in India and the US, holds 60% more than its capacity. Capacity is about 1,000. They have about another 60%, 2,000 and odd. this overcrowding, crowding leads to a lot of chaos, less justice, and more indiscipline among prisoners themselves. So, if the US, for instance, holds more than the US holds more than 1.8 million prisoners in about 5,000 prisons and correctional facilities. The UK has 140 prisons and India has 1,400 prisons. Fortunately, again, the Bureau of Police Research, for information if you're interested, they bring out a report, annual report, Prisons in India. That's a reasonable reflection of the state of prisons in this country. Numbers cannot be fudged too much, and overcrowding has come down considerably. More well-resourced prisons, better treatment of prisoners has come about. The US, when you talk about the prisons in the US, you immediately think of the Guantanamo Bay. The kind of nobody is accountable. Although a number of prisoners have been released from Guantanamo Bay, still one doesn't have enough accurate reporting on what's happening to prisoners who are still held. So this is very galling. And what is most painful is the number of under-trial prisoners who are kept in jails. This is an important aspect of prison administration in all countries. Almost, now I got nearly 75% of those in Indian prisons are under trials. Given the slow pace of trials in this country, everybody knows about it, how justice is delayed in our country, and so many commissions have gone about to speed up trials and all that. Very little has worked. But the most inhuman aspect of prisons is that there are about 75% of those who are held in prisons at any point of time are under trials. Many of them were very trivial offenses. Majority of poor people were held in prisons for several years. A few alone somehow get bail to go out, but are unable to produce the surety amount which will give effect to the judgments in their favor. So this is, nobody has been able to. Lawyers and others, they keep on cribbing about the delay in trials. All dramatis personae in this system are responsible for delaying trials. Now, I wrote a piece yesterday, Professor Rajkumar is available in Hindustan Times. I'm appalled by the fact that courts in India take such a long time in awarding bail. You either refuse or grant bail. In my time, as a police officer at the bottom, bail decisions are not taken up to the Supreme Court. This is, I think Supreme Court must put its foot down. That is one of the best Chief Justices we have, Justice Chandrachud. He has said, I will handle at least 10 cases of bail application every day. Very good, looks very good. But my fundamental question is, why should bail decisions go up to the Supreme Court? As I've written, it's no rocket science. A person is arrested by the police, and after the police interrogation is over, he's sent to the prisons. And there the prisoner applies for bail. Facts are very simple. The prosecution knows for what offenses a particular person is held. That is again not gibberish. They know the facts. Either the true facts or not, they put down some document in the form of a remand report to the magistrate concerned. And then when that prisoner protests against it, he files for bail. Facts are very clear. Even the lowest court, having magistrates the lowest IQ, can understand why he is locked up. Particularly, I'm pleading the cause for non-violent offenders. Somebody took exception to my article yesterday. One of my officers was with me, he said, sir, you're wrong. They deserve to be in the prison longer than, how can you allow terrorists and others and give bail? But I'm pleading the cause of the poor and uneducated prisoners who are held in prisons just because they can't hire advocates, or if the state gives you an advocate, he's the poorest of the advocates, and they still hold them in jail. And even if they give a decision in favor of the prisoner coming out, he has to produce a surety. Nobody will give them a surety. So this is the most galling aspect of our entire criminal justice system, especially in India, the number of under-trial prisoners. Then this, I don't want to use harsh language, let's say we hauled up by the highest court, and this is a scandalous indictment of the system that you hold prisoners forever, and then you debate it. I am appalled, intrigued, and sometimes amused by the debate which goes on whether X deserves a bail or not. Facts are simple. The Supreme Court decisions are very clear. As long as a person is not committed a violent offense, and he is otherwise behaved himself well, what is the harm in releasing a prisoner on bail? As long, there are three conditions. That is, he should not be accused of a violent offense. Second, as long as there is no fear of his fleeing from justice. And finally, he will not tamper with evidence. No force, even the God Almighty cannot predict that a person will not tamper with evidence. Naturally, like this, recently this came to the fore. I'm not accusing any agency. He is not cooperating with the investigation. See, many agencies, they say that he's not cooperating with the investigation, that's why we're holding him. But as many eminent lawyers, with whom I don't like those lawyers, but still they say, they're very convincing. How will any prisoner inculpate himself? He will not say, I committed a crime. It's again, self-incrimination is prohibited by the Constitution of India. Well, like most democracies, that you need not give a statement to the police. You can keep right to silence. That is the essence of criminal justice jurisprudence in all countries. Here, certain persons are being held because they refuse to tell the police what they want them to say. That is unconstitutional. And I was referring to, I was talking to an eminent judge, a friend of mine, a lady. She says the lower courts wash their hands of the whole matter. They just blindly remand people to prison. But they don't understand, they don't know the Constitution. I mean, the appalling state of the lower judiciary in this country is very difficult to describe. First of all, they are under pressure from the police to do what the police wants. Secondly, they don't know the Constitution of India. They don't read the Constitution of India. Constitution of India bestows on every individual the right to remain silent in police custody. And then this is a constitutional provision. The lowest court, they don't read the Constitution, they are ignorant of the Constitution of India, and they go by the law enforcement agency saying that they deserve to be inside prison because they refuse to cooperate with the police. No prisoner will say, I committed the crime. It's the task of the police. Or the police to unravel the truth. So this is one aspect of criminal justice. This is peculiar to India, and that is very, very difficult to swallow. And then, fortunately, in most of the countries, police brutality, I believe, has come down a little. At least it's not reported. Whereas the US and India share this problem of police brutality. We have had many instances in the US, Rodney King in Los Angeles in 1991, later in Floyd in Minneapolis, a famous instance in which police misbehaved. Of course, Rodney King, he didn't die, but this Floyd was killed, a police officer standing on his chest. So brutality is common to all democracies because If such instances happen, the government has no right to claim that it's a democratic government. And we had one instance in Tamil Nadu also recently. 2 shopkeepers were done to death over a course of time because they kept open their establishments beyond the stipulated time during the COVID period. That's tragic. And earlier in Kerala, we had this infamous camp, prisoners' camp, informally, the police did, and then so many prisoners died. So these instances of brutality and violence on the part of the law enforcement machinery exist in all developed democracies, varying degrees. We had in London the Stephen Smith instance of a black youth being killed under police custody. So a liberal democracy doesn't mean an end to police brutality, but there is a need for eternal vigilance. Finally, come to the most sacrosanct area of judiciary. No analysis of the criminal justice system of a country can be complete without a reference to the judiciary, the ultimate arbiter of all contentious issues affecting the dramatis personae who strut the stage. Here one will have to tiptoe our steps because of the sensitivities involved. The doctrine of contempt of court, very tricky. It's vague and tricky. I had always thought that as long as you did not criticize the conduct of a judge, you may criticize judgment, you are safe. But if you did not question his character, then you are safe. But then it's not, the subject is not, as long as you don't attribute motives to a judge, you are safe. It seems the subject is not as simple as that. I remember a hilarious incident about 2 decades ago that a judge, I don't know what level that judge was, who did not get a seat in a reserved compartment of a train. He hauled up the railway station master or some other worthy in the railways for contempt of court because he couldn't get a seat in the trains. This happened. I'm not making it up. So I don't know whether you have come far away from that funny act, but judges are extremely sensitive, subjective, and I'm not mentioning names because I'll be hauled up by contempt of court, but this is what happens. Judges carry their prejudices, like all human beings. If you wanted a judge to be totally objective, totally free from emotions, it's asking for the moon. So the very slow rate of disposal of case, just a moment. Now, I had always thought that as long as you did not attribute motives to the judge, you are safe. It seems the subject is not as simple as that. And then, thanks to intensive media scrutiny of anything that happens under the sun, we do not have such questionable rulings of a judge convicting or hauling up a station master for not giving him a seat in the train. Nevertheless, when being critical of the judiciary, we have to be extremely careful. All 3 countries, US, UK, and India, are liberal democracies, have commendable systems. We have an excellent judiciary. Whatever you may say, criticize about the Indian judiciary, you can't be hypercritical. A majority of them have been carefully chosen. There is no doubt politics in the choice of judges. Just as in the US, UK have not had the higher judiciary is still insular, but US and India, there's always a lot of politics which are associated with the choice of judges. The US do it openly, but where here probably we're a little more subtle about it. And this conflict between the executive and the judiciary is common to all democracies. The US, Trump keeps on raving about the judiciary, fixed to malign him. So here, but there's one theory, which is a very slippery area, Raj would admit, appointment of judges. A lot of my friends say that India is the only country where judges appoint themselves, and not every other country. Here they have reserved the right, thanks to these 2nd judge's case, that they are the final arbiter who will be a judge, who will not be. The successive governments have fought this, but they are unable to do anything. So But I'm appalled with the controversy, yes, but at the highest level in the Supreme Court of India, naturally, I mean, I have no reason to believe that they are anything but bright. They may not be the brightest a lot, but you must consider that ethnicity does play a role. Like in the US, suddenly 2 African Americans are appointed. One president packs the court. Every president thinks it's divine right to pack the court with his favorites. So that's open. Here, a little more subtle. And here also, every government tries to accommodate as many ethnic interests, as many regions as possible. So I'm not, because almost all of them, they go through scrutiny. The IB, which does the scrutiny, I think I myself have been involved in the process, but these agencies which are required to report, they report facts. It's for the government to ignore facts. Or I remember, I mean, I can now, it's so many years after one prospective candidate for a judgeship, he came and told me, I know what you reported against me, that I'm used to taking liquor. That's what you held out against me. As a result, I lost my appointment to the Supreme Court. So whatever the report, that's a fact. He did not deny that fact, but we reported honestly that this man was known for his addiction to liquor. So they go through a process of scrutiny, and after this, if anything egregiously wrong with the candidate, I don't think any Chief Justice will stick his neck out and appoint him. And that's a safeguard we have. A scrutiny by an agency, I'm not saying independent, agency, they report to the Supreme Court and the government, then the judges are appointed. My fundamental philosophy is, we don't want the brightest of people to be judges. We want them to be the most honest Indian citizens who should be appointed to the judiciary, which does take place reasonably in our country and in the US also. The US, the scrutiny of candidates for the US Supreme Court is very intense. They go back as far as the kindergarten class of a candidate, check whether he has cheated on exams at the kindergarten level. The scrutiny is so intense, and it may not be as intense as that in India, but still there is a process of scrutiny. If something abnormal comes to notice of the Chief Justice or the government, that a person is bad, is known for his lack of integrity or for other activities, then no government in its senses will ever appoint him. No Supreme Court judge will recommend him. So we have a fairly safe, type-proof procedure for appointing judges. So, but the whole point is, the debate turns on ethnicity or his character rather than on his integrity, personal integrity, that he will not compromise his personal integrity when he sits on the bench. That should be the focus of people, focus of governments in appointing people. We don't want the brightest, Raj will agree, we don't want the brightest of lawyers, brightest of better subordinate judges to adorn the Supreme Court of India. So each, and the US and UK now created a high court, it's called the Supreme Court of the UK. So all these, we have had no reports of rank bad appointments, and perspectives vary about a particular individual, X or Y, and the government or the judiciary succumbs to this principle, accommodates, and I won't say succumbs, accommodates the principle of ethnicity, principle of regional differences, then one should not object to such appointments. And over the course, I've been watching the judiciary for more than 3 decades. They have not had such shocking appointments. And like the appointment to the CBI, and thanks to this committee which sits in, no extremely bad appointment has been reported in the recent past. If a person has a very bad record, he has a very bad reputation, no committee like the Prime Minister, Home Minister, and the Chief Justice of India will ever agree the appointment. So we should thank our stars that there is some scrutiny in all 3 countries before a judge is appointed. So this, in nutshell is the criminal justice system in all three countries. I won't say we have the best of the system. No system is perfect. Every system has its loopholes. Every system suffers from subjectivity and biases. If you take all these into account, we have done reasonably well. How much more can you do with a system which depends on the character of individual judges, individual policemen, and individual superintendents of prisons? So we ensure a certain process of scrutiny before coming to office and after coming to office. So as a result, I'm not trying to varnish or whitewash the ills of the system. No system is perfect. We have a fairly good system in place in all three countries. But still, we have to make do with it. Ultimately, the public should act as the watchdogs of all these agencies and should not fight shy of going in public to unravel any misconduct on the part of a judge or a police officer or a prison official. The safeguard which is built in liberal democracies, that you have free speech, free representation to those who administer the government, that's the best safeguard we can have. And thank you very much again for inviting me here. And I'm now open to questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Raghavan, for a fascinating set of reflections and even very thought-provoking ideas, comparing different legal systems and also law enforcement mechanisms.
Thank you so much, Isha. It's been a fascinating lecture. We are so glad that Dr. Raghavan is here with us. And indeed, this is a great opportunity for us not only to hear his insightful lecture, but also to commemorate the life and contributions of Professor Roger Hood. I know that with one lecture and such an activity, we are all not going to get expertise or attain expertise on a particular topic, but our endeavor is to introduce such works so that you go on to get inspired and do far greater work in the future in whatever vocation you choose. And we are so grateful to Dr. Raghavan for this time of his this afternoon. And we are also glad to welcome you, Professor Raghavan, to the university in a formal capacity. And we are indeed thankful to you for all your guidance and support over the years that made us traverse this far and achieve whatever little we could in a modest way. We are thankful to you once again. And I sincerely hope that some of you would be able to join Dr. Raghavan's book talk this afternoon at 4 o'clock. And before we disperse, I would request the Vice Chancellor to felicitate our guest this afternoon.
As we draw this memorable occasion to a close, I would like to extend my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you. A special acknowledgement is also due to the technical team and the administrative staff whose behind-the-scene efforts ensured the smooth functioning of the event. To Professor Raj, Srijit, and Professor Patnaik, your unwavering support in elevating the caliber of this event. And on behalf of everyone in this room, a very special thank you to Dr. Raghavan for your time, insights, and lessons. Thank you, everyone.